It was an ordinary afternoon when everything changed. The sun was just starting to dip behind the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over my apartment. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sorting through some paperwork, when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was familiar. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Is this your name?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "It's your mom." I froze. My mother? It had been a while since we last spoke. Sure, we exchanged a few texts here and there, but it wasn't like we had long, deep conversations. I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect what she said next. "I know how much you make now." There was a pause, and I could hear her voice shaking just slightly. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Maybe the call wasn't from my mom after all. But the more I tried to make sense of her words, the more they started to sink in. How do you know?" I asked, my heart pounding. I hadn't told anyone about my recent promotion or my salary. The only people who might know were my close friends, but even they didn't have the full picture. And my mom? She wasn't exactly the type to be involved in those details. "I have my ways," she said, her voice suddenly colder. "But that's not important. What matters is that I need $4,500 from you every month." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My head spun, and I had to sit down on the nearest chair to steady myself. I must have misunderstood. Maybe this was a joke, some twisted prank. But her voice wasn't joking. It was firm, demanding. "I need that money," she continued. "I've worked hard all my life, and now it's your turn to take care of me." I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. How could she ask for that much? And why now? I had never asked for anything from her. I'd always done my best to take care of myself and help her when I could. But this was different. It felt like an ultimatum. The anger started bubbling up inside of me, but I tried to stay calm. I can't give you that kind of money," I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. "It's just not possible." "Oh, it's possible," she retorted quickly. "You've been doing well for yourself. I know it. Don't act like you don't have it. You owe me this." "Owe you?" My voice cracked. "What do you mean, owe you? I've always helped you when I could, but this is too much. You can't just demand money from me like this. I raised you. I made sure you had everything you needed growing up," she shot back, her voice tight. "And now it's your turn to support me. I don't think that's too much to ask." There was a long silence on the line. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding it. I had never been in a position where my mother made demands like this before. It was always a give-and-take relationship. But this felt like control. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. How did she find out how much I made? Why was she asking for such a large sum? And why now? I had always helped her when she needed it, but this was an entirely different situation. She wasn't just asking for help. She was asking for more than I could give. And it wasn't about necessity. It was about entitlement. I didn't know what to say. The words seemed to catch in my throat. She was my mother, but in that moment, I felt betrayed. This wasn't the same woman who had always told me to stand on my own 2 feet, to build my own future. This was someone who was now trying to take what I had worked so hard for. It hurt. Finally, I managed to speak. "I'll need to think about it, but I can't promise you anything." "Think about it all you want," she snapped. "But I expect that money from you every month. Don't make me ask again." Before I could respond, she hung up. The phone call had left me in a state of shock. I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. "You owe me this." My mother had always been demanding, yes, but this felt like something darker. I had never felt this kind of pressure from her before. It was as if the roles had completely reversed, and she was the one calling the shots. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze. I tried to distract myself, but nothing worked. I couldn't focus on anything else. The more I thought about the call, the more questions flooded my mind. How did she find out how much I made? I hadn't told anyone about my recent salary increase, not even my closest friends. So how did she know? That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to piece everything together. And then, it hit me. My brother. Of course, it had to be him. My brother had always been close with our mother, and he knew exactly how much I was earning. He had always been the one to share every little detail of my life with her, even when I didn't want him to. Could it be that he had told her about my income? Maybe he had mentioned it casually during one of their conversations. But even if that were the case, why would she suddenly ask for money? We had never had this kind of relationship before. Sure, I had helped her out with smaller amounts here and there, but this was something else entirely. Was my brother the one who had pushed her to make such an outrageous request? I reached out to him the next morning, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" He sounded distracted on the other end of the line. "Sure. What's up?" "I need to ask you something," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you tell Mom how much I make?" There was a long pause, and I could feel the tension rising. I might have mentioned it once or twice," he admitted. "But I didn't think it would be a big deal." "A big deal?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "She called me last night, and now she wants $4,500 a month from me. Did you tell her I could afford that?" He sighed. "Look, I didn't think she'd take it that way. She's been asking for money from me too, and I just thought maybe you could help her out. I didn't think she'd demand that much from you." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "You don't get it," I said, my voice shaking. "She's not just asking for help. She's demanding it, and now I'm the one who has to deal with this." "Look, it's just money," he said. "Why not just give it to her? You can afford it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You don't understand. It's not just about money. It's about respect. She's using me. She's been using me for years, and now she's taking it too far." "Well, I'm not going to get involved," he said, his tone dismissive. "You deal with it." The conversation ended with me feeling more alone than ever. My brother wasn't going to help me. He had already decided where his loyalties lay, and it wasn't with me. He wasn't the one who had to deal with the fallout from our mother's demands. I sat there staring at the phone, my anger and frustration building. How could he be so indifferent? How could he not see what was happening? It was clear to me now that if anyone was going to stand up to her, it had to be me. But how? How could I fight back against my own mother? How could I confront her when everything I had done for her was now being used as a weapon against me? Before I could process everything that had happened, my mind drifted back in time. I began to replay moments from my childhood, moments that now felt like distant memories, yet somehow shaped the person I had become. My relationship with my mom was complicated, like a mix of love, guilt, and obligation. Growing up, I always knew that my mother was tough. She was strong, driven, and independent. I admired her for that, but there was also a part of me that longed for the soft, nurturing side I sometimes saw in other families. My mom was a single parent, and she did everything she could to provide for me. She worked long hours, sometimes multiple jobs, just to make ends meet. In many ways, I respected her for how hard she worked, but there were times when her expectations felt overwhelming. I was never allowed to make mistakes, and I was constantly pushed to do better. It was as if no matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. There was always more to be done, more to achieve, more to give. I had always been the responsible one. My brother, on the other hand, was the golden child. He was charming, easygoing, and always seemed to get away with everything. Even though I worked tirelessly to prove myself, it was always my brother who seemed to get the attention. He could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. I tried to come to terms with it, but there were moments like when I was sitting there on the phone with my mom that I felt the weight of all those years of unspoken tension. All of it seemed to come rushing back. It was as if my mother's demands weren't just about money. They were about a lifetime of me trying to live up to expectations I could never quite meet. I had worked so hard to build a life for myself, to escape the shadows of those expectations. I had started my own career, built my own future. But now, here was my mother, demanding that I hand over a portion of that future. The emotional toll of it all began to sink in, and it was more painful than I had ever anticipated. I thought back to all the times I had tried to help her. I remembered the nights I stayed up late, making sure my bills were paid so I could send money back home. I remembered all the little sacrifices I made to ensure that she had what she needed. But now it felt like none of that mattered. What mattered now was what I could do for her at this very moment, and I had nothing left to give. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my mother's call wasn't just about asking for money. It was about control. It was as if she saw my success as an opportunity to take what was hers, as if I owed her for everything she had done, even though I had already given everything I had. I kept replaying that conversation in my head. "I need $4,500 every month," she had said, as if it were nothing, as if it were her right. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how outrageous it was. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the woman who raised me. The woman who taught me to stand on my own, to build my own life. The woman who never asked for anything. I kept asking myself, was I being selfish? Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just give her what she wanted and end this. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was losing myself. Wasn't I allowed to keep some of the things I had worked so hard for? Was I supposed to be nothing more than a source of support for her, even if it meant sacrificing my own well-being? I had never been good at confrontation. I wasn't the kind of person to make waves. But this time, it felt like I had no choice. I couldn't let her control me like this. It wasn't just about the money. It was about my life, my future. I took a deep breath and called her back. This time I would be clear. I had to be. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said," I began, my voice steady but firm. "And I can't give you $4,500 every month. It's just not something I can do." She was quiet on the other end of the line, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe she had heard me. But then she responded, her voice colder than before. "You can afford it," she snapped. "I've been there for you your whole life, and now you're going to turn your back on me?" I felt the guilt creeping in, but I refused to let it control me. "It's not about turning my back on you," I said. "It's about what's fair. I can't give you that much money, and you can't expect me to. I raised you," she said, her voice rising. "I sacrificed everything for you, and now you're telling me no? After all I've done for you?" There it was again, the guilt, the manipulation. I had spent my whole life trying to live up to her expectations, but now I was being asked to pay for it in a way that I couldn't afford, both financially and emotionally. "Mom, I can't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "I love you, but I can't keep giving and giving until there's nothing left of me." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air. And then she spoke, her voice softer now, almost resigned. "I don't know what else to say." And with that, she hung up. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, staring at the phone in my hand. What had just happened? Was I wrong for standing up for myself? Was I being selfish? I thought about all the sacrifices I had made over the years, the late nights working to send money home, the times I had put my own dreams on hold just to make sure she was okay. Growing up, I never questioned my role in the family. I had always been the one to step up, the one who took responsibility. I didn't resent it, not at first, but as time went on, I began to feel the weight of it all. My mom had always made it clear that I had to work hard to succeed. But when I did succeed, it was never enough. I thought about the time I had worked my butt off to get into a good college, the nights I had stayed up late studying so I could get a scholarship. I thought about all the times I had skipped social events or missed out on things just to make sure I had enough money to send home. But no matter how much I gave, it was never appreciated in the way I needed it to be. Even when I got my first job, it was the same thing. My mom would call asking for money and I would send it without hesitation. But she never asked how I was doing. She never asked what I needed. It was always about what she needed. It was always about her comfort, her life, and now here she was asking for more. I had spent my whole life trying to meet her expectations, and it still wasn't enough. It felt like no matter how much I did, I was never truly seen for who I was, just for what I could provide. But as painful as it was, I was beginning to realize something important. I couldn't keep living my life like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for someone who would never truly understand. I needed to take control of my own life. As the days passed, I began to feel the pressure mounting. My mind kept racing, replaying every moment of that phone call. The anger, the frustration, the betrayal, it all started to consume me. How could she do this? How could she ask for so much after everything I had already given? The tension between us grew, and I could feel it in every conversation we had after that. My mom would try to call, but I would avoid her calls, not knowing what to say. When I did pick up, the conversation always felt strained, awkward. She would mention the money as if nothing had changed. She wasn't backing down. And neither was I. I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep avoiding the issue. But at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to give her what she wanted, not without a fight. As the days passed, the weight of what my mother had said continued to haunt me. I couldn't stop thinking about her demand for $4,500 a month. What had happened to the woman who raised me with love, guidance, and discipline? It felt like that version of her had disappeared, replaced by someone unrecognizable. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about making me feel like I owed her everything. It felt like a betrayal on a level I had never imagined possible. The deeper I thought about it, the more I realized that my mother had been using me for years. In the past, when I helped her with money, it was always under the guise of love and family support. But now it was as though that love had been weaponized. It wasn't about helping her anymore. It was about making me feel guilty for not giving more. I couldn't ignore the growing resentment bubbling up inside of me. My whole life, I had been made to feel like my worth was measured by what I could provide. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. Every time she needed something, she would make me feel obligated to give, even if it meant sacrificing my own well-being. And now, this demand, this outrageous request, had pushed me to the edge. I wasn't the same person I had been a few years ago. I had changed. I had learned to stand up for myself, to take control of my own destiny. But this was a betrayal I couldn't just overlook. I thought about my brother. For years, he had always been the favored one, the golden child. He never had to deal with the same level of responsibility or pressure that I did. He could do whatever he wanted, and my mom would always forgive him. But me? I was expected to give, to provide, to be the reliable one. It was clear to me now that my brother had been enabling her. He never questioned her requests. He never stood up to her, and that was part of why I was in this position now. She felt entitled to take what she wanted, no matter the cost. But I was done. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go on any longer. The betrayal I felt wasn't just about money. It was about being used, about feeling like I was nothing more than a resource for her to tap into whenever she felt like it. But what could I do? How could I stand up to my own mother? How could I protect myself from the emotional manipulation without destroying the relationship entirely? It was clear to me that I couldn't let this situation continue. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me, not even my mother. The anger inside me grew, and a sense of determination started to take root. I had to teach her a lesson. She needed to understand that I wasn't a bottomless pit of money, that I had boundaries, and that my life wasn't just there to serve her needs, but I knew I couldn't just lash out in anger. This needed to be calculated. I had to take a step back and figure out how I could make my point without making things worse. If I confronted her too aggressively, I risked losing her completely. But if I just gave in, I would be letting her walk all over me. There had to be another way. I started to think about the consequences of giving in. If I agreed to her demands, it wouldn't just be a one-time thing. She would expect more, and it would never stop. She would feel entitled to my money forever, and that wasn't something I could allow. Instead, I decided to make an offer, a compromise of sorts, but one that would show her the limits of what I could give. I called her a few days later, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tension building. "Mom," I said, "I've thought about it, and I'm willing to help you. But not $4,500. I can give you $1,500 a month. That's all I can afford? I heard her silence on the other end of the line, and I knew she wasn't expecting that response. She had assumed I would just cave in and give her what she wanted, but I wasn't going to let her take advantage of me anymore. $500? She asked, her voice incredulous. That's not nearly enough. I held my ground. I'm sorry, but that's all I can do. I've got my own responsibilities, and I can't keep giving everything I have to you. Her voice softened, but the disappointment was evident. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said. I raised you. I've always taken care of you, and now you're turning your back on me. I'm not turning my back on you, Mom, I replied, struggling to keep my emotions in check. I'm just setting boundaries. I can't keep giving without receiving anything in return. This isn't sustainable for me. The conversation ended shortly after that. I could hear her frustration, her anger, but I knew that I had done the right thing. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had to stand up for myself. I couldn't let her guilt me into giving her everything. I had to take control of my own life, and I couldn't let her dictate my future. In the days that followed, I began to think more strategically about my next steps. I had offered her $1,500, but I knew that wasn't enough to make her stop. She was stubborn, and if I didn't follow through on my boundaries, she would continue to push for more. It was time to be more proactive. I began to think about how I could leverage this situation in my favor. What did I need to do to make sure she understood that this wasn't just about money, but about respect? I had already taken the first step by standing my ground and offering a compromise, but I needed something more. I needed to teach her that her demands were not going to control my life. I thought back to the things she had said during our conversation. She had always painted herself as the one who sacrificed everything for me. But the truth was, I had made sacrifices too, and it was time she realized that. I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to burn bridges, but I also didn't want to keep enabling her behavior. There had to be a way to make her see that she couldn't continue to manipulate me. Over the next few days, I started to formulate a plan. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about showing her that I wouldn't be controlled anymore. I had to show her that my generosity was not something she could take for granted. A few days after our conversation, I called my mom again. This time, I felt a bit more confident, knowing I had already set the boundaries. But as soon as I heard her voice, the familiar guilt began to creep in. Mom, I began, I want to make it clear that I can't give you more than what I've already offered. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice shaky. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I could feel the old guilt creeping in again, but I fought it back. It's not about repaying you. It's about taking care of myself, too. I can't keep giving everything I have to you. I have to think about my own future. But I gave you everything, she said. I sacrificed for you. You're supposed to take care of me now. I am taking care of you, I replied firmly. But I can't keep doing this. I'm setting a limit. Her silence was deafening. I could almost feel her frustration and anger radiating through the phone. But I knew I couldn't back down now. I had to stand my ground even if it meant hurting her in the process. I'm sorry, but this is what I can do, I said, my voice softening. It's all I can offer. And with that, I ended the call. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That phone call marked a turning point in my relationship with my mother. It was no longer about money. It was about respect, about boundaries, about me standing up for myself. But as I sat there reflecting on the conversation, I realized that this wasn't going to be easy. My mom wasn't going to just accept my limits. She wasn't going to understand right away. The truth was, she had been using me for so long, and it was going to take time for her to realize that I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. But that was okay. I had made my decision, and I was ready to stick to it. The days after the phone call were filled with silence, but the silence was louder than any argument. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, thinking it might be my mom calling to apologize or to demand more. But the calls never came. I could sense the distance growing between us. And the longer it lasted, the more I felt the weight of what I had done. I thought I was prepared for this. I thought I knew what it would feel like to set boundaries with her. But the truth was it hurt. It hurt more than I had anticipated. The guilt I felt for standing up for myself, for turning her down, was overwhelming. Was I wrong? Was I being selfish? These questions haunted me in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice. Could I have handled it differently? Would things have turned out better if I had just given her what she asked for? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that giving in would have meant losing myself entirely. I had been living for her approval for so long, trying to meet her expectations, trying to fill the role she wanted me to play. But that was never going to be enough. No matter how much I gave, it wouldn't have been enough. She would have always asked for more, and I would have kept giving until I had nothing left to give. But this time, I wasn't going to let that happen. I had finally reached a breaking point. I had to stop trying to please her. I had to stop letting her manipulate me. Still, the pain lingered. The silence between us felt like a wedge being driven deeper into our relationship. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had made my decision, but it didn't make it any easier. The emotional toll was heavier than I expected. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to make things right again. But I knew that I couldn't go back to where we had been. I couldn't just give her everything without expecting something in return. I couldn't sacrifice my own happiness for her demands anymore. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness as I realized that this moment might be the point of no return. Could we ever go back to what we had before? Would she ever understand why I did what I did? Would she ever stop seeing me as just a source of support? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I had to stay strong for me and for my future. I spent the following days in a fog of emotion, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't keep avoiding her forever, but I also couldn't just give in to her demands. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had two choices. I could either continue to let her dictate my life, or I could take control of my own destiny. I decided to take action. The first step was something I never thought I'd have to do. I had to stop talking to her. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was incredibly painful. I thought back to all the times I had helped her, all the times I had been there when she needed me. It hurt to think that I had to distance myself from her, but it was the only way for me to protect myself. I didn't call her, and I didn't respond to her messages. I needed space, time to think, time to reflect on what was really important. A week went by, and still, no word from her. It was like she had disappeared from my life, and as strange as it sounded, I began to feel a sense of relief. The constant pressure was gone. The weight of her expectations no longer hung over me. But then one evening, I got a message from her. I didn't know what to expect. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. The message was short and to the point. I need to talk. I felt a mixture of dread and curiosity. What did she want now? Had she finally come to her senses? Or was this just another attempt to manipulate me into giving her what she wanted? I didn't know, but I knew that I couldn't keep avoiding this. It was time to face the music. Time to see if we could have a real conversation, or if this was the end of everything. When I saw my mother's name on the screen, my hands trembled. It was the first time in weeks that she had reached out. And to be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me wanted to pick up and hear her out, to hear her say that she understood why I had done what I did. But another part of me dreaded hearing her voice again. I didn't want to go back to that place where I was nothing more than a provider. I didn't want to fall into the trap of giving and giving without ever receiving anything in return. I had to protect myself. I picked up the phone, taking a deep breath before I spoke. Hello? She didn't waste any time. I don't understand why you're doing this. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Her voice was tight with anger, but there was an underlying sadness there, too. I felt the familiar guilt creeping in. It was hard to hear her like this, but I had to stay strong. Mom, it's not about repaying you. I love you, but I can't keep giving you money. I can't keep sacrificing my own future to support you. But I raised you, she cried. I gave up everything for you. And now you're turning your back on me? You owe me! The words stung. But I had to remind myself that I wasn't the one who was wrong. I wasn't the one asking for too much. She was. Mom, I've always helped you when I could. But this is too much. You can't keep demanding everything from me. I'm your mother, she shouted, her voice breaking. I don't deserve this. The anger in her voice made me step back, but I stood my ground. I'm not turning my back on you. I'm just setting boundaries. I can't keep doing this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might finally understand. But then she spoke again, her voice tinged with bitterness. You'll regret this, she said, her voice cold. You'll see. I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't back down. I won't regret it, Mom. I'm doing what's best for me. The call ended shortly after that. I sat there feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I had stood up for myself, but it had cost me. I wasn't sure where we stood anymore, and that hurt more than anything. As the weeks went by, I began to feel the emotional toll of everything that had happened. I had cut ties with my mother in a way that I never thought I would, and it hurt. But at the same time, I knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't keep living my life in the shadow of her demands. I couldn't keep sacrificing everything for her. I had to rebuild my own life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt guilty, when I missed the way things used to be, when I wished I could just go back to the way things were before all of this happened. But I also knew that I had made progress. I had learned to set boundaries, to stand up for myself. I had learned that my happiness and peace were just as important as anyone else's. I started focusing on my career again, dedicating myself to my work and my personal growth. I spent more time with my friends, with people who valued me for who I was, not just for what I could give them, and little by little, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I wasn't defined by my mother's expectations anymore. I was finally free to live my own life, on my own terms. As I spent more time alone with my thoughts, I began to realize just how much my perception of love and family had been shaped by years of cultural and personal expectations. Family, I had always been taught, comes first. And in that regard, I had always believed that love was something given freely, no matter the cost. You love unconditionally, support each other without question, and always put the needs of your loved ones before your own. It was a belief that had been ingrained in me for as long as I could remember. But the reality of the situation between my mother and me had made me question that notion deeply. I had always thought that my role in the family was to give, emotionally, financially, and in every other way. I had always done my best to meet her expectations. But the more I thought about everything that had happened, the more I realized that love, while powerful, isn't always about giving endlessly without considering the cost. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries, for the sake of your own well-being. This was a lesson I had learned the hard way. For years, I had allowed my mother's demands to define me. I had built my life around trying to fulfill her expectations. But in doing so, I had lost sight of my own needs. I had neglected my own desires, dreams, and peace of mind just to ensure that she was satisfied. In some ways, I had been so focused on trying to be the perfect son, the perfect provider, that I had forgotten that I, too, deserved respect. I deserved to be seen as more than just someone to take care of others. What I had been doing, I now realized, wasn't love. It was martyrdom. And martyrdom, as noble as it may seem on the surface, wasn't sustainable. It was a path that led to burnout, resentment, and a slow erasure of who you are. Love should never come at the cost of your own identity, your own happiness. And love, as I learned, cannot be one-sided. It's not just about giving. It's about receiving, too. It's about understanding and being understood. And above all, it's about balance. Family doesn't always have to come first. In fact, sometimes putting yourself first is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and the people you care about. By taking care of myself, by setting those boundaries with my mom, I was learning what it truly meant to love, not just others, but myself as well. And in that realization, I understood that love and family should never be used as tools of manipulation. It should never come with strings attached or come at the expense of your mental and emotional well-being. The love between family members should be mutual, respectful, and most importantly, should never leave you feeling empty and exhausted. The lessons came slowly, one after another like drops of water wearing down the stone. But when I finally took a step back to examine everything I had learned, I realized that the biggest lesson of all was about self-respect. It wasn't just about standing up to my mother or setting boundaries with her. It was about understanding my own worth and learning how to protect it. For so long, I had allowed myself to be defined by what others needed from me. My mother especially had taught me that my role was to give, to provide, to sacrifice. I had bought into the idea that love meant always being there for others, no matter the cost. And for a time, that was true. I wanted to be the person everyone could count on. But in doing so, I had lost track of who I was. I had lost sight of my own happiness, my own desires, and most importantly, my own boundaries. Learning that I had the right to say no, to prioritize my needs over someone else's, was a revelation. It felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I realized that I didn't have to sacrifice my happiness for anyone, no matter how much I loved them. I didn't have to give away everything I had, emotionally and financially, just to prove my love. I didn't have to put myself last in order to be loved in return. The hardest lesson, though, was understanding that boundaries were not just about saying no. They were about saying yes to myself. They were about recognizing that my own well-being mattered. The emotional toll that years of neglecting my own needs had taken on me became painfully clear. My sense of self had been eroded by years of giving, of living up to someone else's expectations. But now, with the courage to say no, I was starting to rebuild. I had learned that no one can love you the way you love yourself. The only way to show love in a healthy way is by first respecting and caring for yourself. And while this lesson was a painful one, it was also liberating. I had finally given myself permission to take care of me. In the weeks that followed the fallout, I found myself experiencing a strange mix of emotions. On the one hand, there was relief. I no longer felt the suffocating pressure to give more than I had. I no longer had to live in fear of disappointing my mother. But on the other hand, there was sadness, a deep, lingering ache. I missed the person I thought I was, the one who could always be counted on, the one who would do anything for family. But that person, I realized, had never been fully seen or appreciated. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about the emotional sacrifices I had made for years, the ways in which I had allowed my own happiness to be compromised for the sake of others. The emotional toll of that had taken a bigger toll on me than I had ever realized. It was hard to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't continue to let myself be used. I couldn't continue to allow my sense of self to be defined by others' demands. But at the same time, the grief of losing that relationship with my mother was real. It was painful. And yet the pain was necessary. It was the pain of growth, of moving past a toxic cycle, of breaking free from expectations that had no room for my own needs. I still didn't know how to handle the silence. It was deafening, like a constant reminder of everything that had been broken. But as time went on, I began to feel the weight of that silence shift. I realized that the silence was not just an absence of communication. It was a space where I could start to heal, a space where I could start to rebuild myself without the constant pull of my past. Gradually, I began to reclaim my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when the sadness would hit unexpectedly, when I would miss the comfort of my mother's presence, even if it was one that always carried strings. I missed the way I had once been able to take care of her without thinking twice. But as I continued to rebuild my sense of self, I started to see the world in a new light. I realized that in order to move forward, I had to stop living for others. I had to stop trying to meet everyone else's expectations and start setting my own. I began to invest in my career, in personal growth, and in relationships that were healthy and supportive. I rediscovered passions that I had set aside for years. I started writing again, spending time outdoors and doing the things that made me happy, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for me, and that sense of freedom, of control over my own future, was something I had never truly experienced before. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that there was a deeper lesson I had learned. It wasn't just about standing up to my mother or setting boundaries. It was about realizing my own worth, my own value, and learning to prioritize my own happiness. I had spent so many years defining myself through my role as a son, as someone who always gave and gave. But I had forgotten that I was more than that. I was a person with my own dreams, my own needs, and my own desires. And those things mattered. The moral of this story is simple. Love yourself enough to set boundaries. Protect your peace. Stand up for yourself even when it's hard. You don't have to sacrifice who you are for anyone, no matter how much you love them. True love, the kind that lasts, is about respect. Respect for yourself and respect for the people you care about. And if someone can't respect your boundaries, no matter who they are, then it's okay to walk away. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your happiness. And in the end, taking care of yourself is the greatest act of love you can give, both to yourself and to those around you. As the months went on, I found myself in a better place emotionally. I had learned the importance of self-respect and self-care. My relationship with my mom remained distant, but I didn't feel the same burden I once did. I had done the hard work of putting myself first, and that had paid off. But there were times when I wondered if I had done enough. Would she ever truly understand what I did? Would she ever be able to forgive me? I didn't know, and that was okay. What mattered now was that I had learned to love myself enough to say no. I had learned that sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the people you care about. After everything that had happened, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I started thinking about what family really meant. For so long, I had lived under the assumption that family was about unconditional support, about always being there for each other no matter what. But now, after everything with my mom, I was beginning to question that assumption. Family had always been painted as this perfect institution where love was supposed to be given freely, without conditions. But the truth was, love isn't always unconditional. It comes with expectations, with sacrifices, with demands. And when those demands cross boundaries, love can sometimes feel more like a burden than a blessing. The idea that family should come first had always been instilled in me. And for a long time I believed it. But now, after everything I had gone through, I realized that it wasn't always true. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is to put yourself first, even if it means stepping away from the people who should love you the most. I thought about my mom. She had always been there for me in one way or another, but her support had always come with strings attached. The problem wasn't that she wanted help, it was that she felt entitled to it. And the moment I said no, everything changed. I had learned that love can't be one-sided, that giving without receiving is a dangerous cycle. Family, I realized, wasn't about blindly giving everything you have. It's about respect, trust, and balance. It's about knowing that you can say no without feeling guilty, that your well-being is just as important as anyone else's. And if a family member can't understand that, then sometimes it's necessary to step back, to take a breath, and to regain control of your own life. Despite the lessons I had learned, there were still moments when guilt crept in. I found myself thinking about my mom, wondering if I had made the right choice. Was there a way I could have handled things differently? Was it possible to help her without losing myself in the process? The guilt I felt was overwhelming at times. I had always been taught that family comes first, that it's my responsibility to take care of those I love. But what happens when that love is used against you? What happens when it feels like your kindness is being taken for granted, when it feels like your love is no longer enough? I started questioning whether I had done the right thing. Could I have been more compassionate? Should I have given her the money she asked for just to keep the peace? The doubts flooded my mind, and for a while, I felt lost. But as I sat with those feelings, I began to realize something important. Guilt, while natural, isn't always a sign that you've made a mistake. It's often a sign that you're doing something difficult, something that feels uncomfortable, but ultimately it's the right thing to do. Setting boundaries, standing up for yourself, even with family, is hard. It feels unnatural at first, but it's the only way to protect yourself, to preserve your peace. I realized that I couldn't keep second-guessing myself. The decision I had made wasn't easy, but it was the right one. I had to stop letting guilt dictate my actions. I had to trust that I had done what was best for me, even if it meant making difficult choices. The days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The silence from my mother continued. I still hadn't reached out to her. It felt like the right decision, even though it was painful. I had started rebuilding my life. My career was growing, and I was making progress on personal goals I had put aside for too long. I was finally learning how to live for myself, without constantly putting everyone else's needs above my own. I had learned to be more mindful, to cherish my time and energy, and to invest in things that brought me happiness. Still, there were days when I missed my mother. I missed the way things used to be, before the demands, before the guilt. I missed the woman who had once been my biggest supporter. But I also knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had grown. I had changed. And I wasn't willing to compromise my sense of self anymore. I had come to understand that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean abandoning the love I once had for my mother. It meant accepting the reality of the situation. I had done what I could, and now it was time to let go of the past and move forward with my life. The future felt uncertain. I didn't know where my relationship with my mom would go from here. I didn't know if we would ever repair the damage done. But I knew one thing for sure. I had made the right decision for myself. And that was enough. The healing process wasn't instant. It took time and it took patience. There were days when the grief would hit me unexpectedly. Moments when I would wonder if I had done the right thing, if I had acted out of anger instead of logic. But as I looked back at how far I had come, I realized that healing was about accepting the pain and learning from it. I had learned that standing up for myself didn't make me a bad person. It didn't mean I didn't love my mother or that I wasn't willing to help her. It meant that I was taking control of my own life, that I was choosing to protect my peace and happiness. As time passed, I began to understand that setting boundaries was an act of love. It wasn't about rejecting the people who cared about me. It was about teaching them how to love me in a way that was healthy, in a way that respected my needs as much as theirs. I had to be willing to walk away from toxic patterns, even if they came from family. And as I continued to grow, I found a sense of peace I had never known before. I didn't need to seek approval from others to feel valued. I didn't need to be constantly available to meet the demands of others. I had my own voice, my own needs, and I was learning how to honor them. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized how much I had learned. The pain, the guilt, the heartbreak. It had all been a part of my journey toward self-discovery. I had learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to stop sacrificing my happiness for others. The hardest lesson of all was that love, even from family, doesn't give anyone the right to take advantage of you. True love is about mutual respect, understanding, and giving with a clear heart. It's not about what you can give, but about the quality of the relationship. As I continued my journey, I knew that the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. I had learned how to protect my peace, how to stand up for what I believed in, and how to love myself enough to walk away from relationships that didn't honor who I was. And that, above all, was the greatest gift I could give myself. I had found my voice. I had found my strength. And I was no longer afraid to use it.